Chapter 11. The Edmonton Front Time. Day 19, post-lock late afternoon. Location: Edmonton Refinery Complex Invasion. Clock: T+0 hours. Invasion begins. The first warning didn't come from a scream or a flare. It came as a shift in the sky, north of Edmonton, under the bruise-colored ceiling of the northern storm. The cloud deck took on a second layer, darker than weather and moving against the wind. The observers who caught it first argued about distance, then stopped arguing when the shadow kept growing. By the time the alert filtered through the chain of command, it had a name that sounded too simple for what it described: Fleet Shadow. It wasn't a single shape. It was a band of silhouettes, slow and deliberate, sliding south through the storm like a continent learning to drift. The Alberta Guard had time to do the wrong kind of preparation. They cleared aprons. They staged vehicles. They told themselves incoming meant aircraft, meant minutes. Edmonton had warning, but not the kind that gave you options, only the kind that let you watch the inevitable arrive. Then the Armada crested the city's horizon. Dark, angular hulls resolved one by one against a washed winter sky, their silhouettes sharpening as they closed. Even at distance they changed the light, not by blotting out the sun, but by making the day feel smaller. They were not weather. They were something that treated the air like a curtain. High overhead, heavily armored troop galleons settled into their slow approach, commanded by Mortis Rex and flanked by smaller, agile escorts that darted and corrected like hunting birds around a lumbering herd. Below, the battle was already a massacre of expectation. Bruin the Mountain lumbered across the concrete apron of the main refinery complex, a figure of mythic rage. Her fur was black and matted with oil and snow, and her massive bulk dwarfed the few Alpha Brain Alberta Guard APCs trying to form a perimeter. "The fools are stubborn, Commander, but predictable," Bruin grunted into her command rune, the word crackling around his knuckles as he punched through the reinforced side of a troop carrier, crumpling the titanium plating like foil. Mortis Rex's cold, dry voice filtered through the arcane network from his flagship, hovering over the central cracking towers. "Low losses, Bruin. Your force had lost only 8 Balugard in the initial drop. Their projectile resistance is laughable, as predicted, but their weapons, if they manage to bracket us, are highly effective against our mail. Did you observe the damage to the second wave?" "I saw it," Bruin replied, tearing the turret off a light tank before tossing it, spinning, into a nearby tank farm. Their automatic cannons chewed through Isengrim mail like paper. Too small to trigger the runes. No innate magic superiority over the Alpha Brain, only the element of surprise. Precisely. This is why we rely on logistics, not hubris. The objective remains: secure the refineries whole. Vane requires the conversion facilities intact. No collateral damage to the cracking towers, Bruin. Focus your troops on asset protection. The battle on the ground was less a fight and more a wave of unstoppable force meeting a thin, brittle line. The Alberta Guard, relying on their belief in the power of superior firepower, were being systematically dismantled. Their high-velocity rifles and machine guns were devastating to the Balugard and Isengrim shock troops, if they could land a clean hit. But the density of the invading forces and the terrifying sight of a giant bear man ripping vehicles apart sent most into immediate panic. In the command bunker deep beneath the refinery complex, a brigadier general watched the live feed as an Isengrim mage unleashed a lightning orb, vaporizing a cluster of 20 soldiers who were trying to hold the main access road. "We can't hold them! They're too fast and too numerous!" shouted a subordinate. "Do we authorize the self-destruct? We can deny them the fuel." The general's face was a mask of utter defeat. Destroying the entire complex would not stop the invasion, but it would shatter Alberta's entire economy and ensure their permanent exile from the Accord. The refinery complex represented 1/3 of the nation's resource wealth. "No," the general whispered, slumping back. We stand down. The Accord might forgive the loss of a city, but they'll never forgive the loss of the fuel supply. Order all units to abandon Edmonton. Retreat south to Red Deer. Leave the complex intact. The order was transmitted. Within minutes, the remaining Alberta Guard units began a desperate, disorganized retreat, leaving their vehicles and winded behind. Mortis Rex observed the quiet flow of retreating Alpha Brain vehicles. They are running. Predictable. They value the asset more than the engagement. The refineries are secured, Bruin grunted, planting a massive claw on a control panel in the main station. The city will burn, but the tanks and towers are untouched. The anchor point is ready, Architect. The Shadow Grasp had taken its first crucial territory on Alpha Grain soil. Mortis Rex gave a faint, satisfied sigh over the comms. Excellent. Commence the necrotic conversion. Vane will be pleased. Now, Bruin, the Lich said, his voice laced with the cold certainty of conquest. Gather your troops. The road to Calgary is open. Chapter 12. The Fall of Hubris Time. Day 19. Post-lock evening. Location room. Calgary. Situation room. Invasion clock. T+3 hours. The lights of Calgary were not golden that night. They were the cold, sterile blue of emergency broadcast screens. In the hastily converted command center high in the Calgary Tower, Premier Marcus Holt, the face of Alberta's staunch independence, watched the map projection of the north shudder with data alarms. The Edmonton oil refineries were gone. Not destroyed, but gone. Replaced by a massive, pulsing green necrotic field, visible even from orbit. The enemy was no longer a theoretical threat. It was a dark cloud crawling south. Report on the rate of advance, Holt demanded, his usual bluster replaced by a brittle, thin veneer of control. A young intelligence officer, eyes bloodshot, pointed a shaking hand at the projection. They are moving fast, Premier. The Balagard shock troops are marching ahead of the main body, taking the fastest highway south. The steam galleons are providing air cover and dropping supply nodes. At this rate, they'll be at the Airdrie perimeter, the northern edge of Calgary, in less than 12 hours. 12 hours! Holt slammed his fist on the control desk. They were supposed to be logistical engineers, not a rapid invasion force. Remains of the Edmonton Guard. A few hundred survivors are streaming south. They are broken, sir. We've already activated the civilian evacuation plan for the north half of the city. We're pulling all remaining provincial forces back to the perimeter for a final stand. Holt spun, running a hand through his carefully coiffed hair. His posture, usually rigid with self-assurance, was visibly collapsing. He walked to the main communications panel, where a secure line to the America's Accord Council in Colorado Springs was open, currently on hold. Put them through, he ordered, his voice raw. The screen flickered, showing the tired, wary face of Ambassador Verick, the Accord's provisional chairperson. Premier Holt, Verick said, her tone professional but weary. We understand you're under stress. How can the Accord assist in this unexpected development? Holt opened his mouth, ready to issue the demands he'd practiced for weeks. Financial aid, military hardware, international protection. But the sight of the necrotic stain where Edmonton had been, and the knowledge of Bruin's unstoppable march, stripped the arrogance from his throat. His voice broke, dropping from a demand to a near plea. Ambassador, they took Edmonton in 3 hours. They didn't destroy the refineries, they converted them. This is not a raid, it is an existential invasion. I formally request the Accord's immediate deployment of military aid. I swallowed my pride once to join your trade agreement, but my political position means nothing if my people are slaughtered. We need help. Please. Verick studied him. The flicker of sympathy brief but genuine. We are aware of the situation, Pring. We received the news from Thorne and Jensen only minutes ago. We're mobilizing assets, but Alberta is sovereign territory. It will take time to get the necessary deployment votes. Holt disconnected the call, the dial tone ringing in the ensuing silence like a death knell. He had asked, he had begged, and he had been given bureaucracy in return. Meanwhile, 10 kilometers north of the besieged city, the Shadow Grasp forces were taking stock. The airships had been landed, their great paddle wheels silent. The Bolligard were settling in, licking their minor wounds from the high-velocity Alpha Brain rounds. Mortis Rex stood at the edge of the conversion field, watching the arcane energy surge from the liquefied refineries. An Isengrim lieutenant approached, clicking their heels. Architect of Decay, the lieutenant reported. The conversion of the field has begun. Initial losses were minimal, but we had 27 Bolligard killed outright by concentrated small arms fire, and nearly 40 Isengrim gravely wounded. Rex's skull-like face showed no emotion, but his cold blue eyes glowed brighter. Unacceptable. I had allocated those forces for the deep rooting of the Calgary anchor. Their weapons are proving more lethal than projected. Bruin's brute force is effective, but costly. He turned, the tattered remains of his command cloak stirring in the oil-heavy wind. I will accompany the main thrust to Calgary. The conversion can be managed by the lower-tier necromancers. My expertise is needed on the battlefield. The lieutenant hesitated. Sir, with respect, the architect commands from the rear. No. Mortis Rex corrected, his voice a dry, rasping sound that promised eternal cold. I command from where the blood is spilled. Every single corpse, Alpha Brain or our own, is a resource wasted if left unutilized. We will not suffer another casualty that is not immediately recycled into our ranks. I will personally ensure our numbers swell with every passing minute of the siege. He raised a bony hand, pointing south toward the desperate lights of Calgary. Let Bruin lead the charge. I will lead the reinforcements. Chapter 13. 12-hour window time. Day 19 post-lock. Evening location. Accord Joint Command, Colorado Springs. Invasion clock, T+3 hours. The massive, brightly lit command and control center in Colorado Springs, the nerve center of the Americas Accord, was no longer a place of weary political discussion. It was a pressure cooker of panic. The air throbbed with the sound of red alerts. Ambassador Elias Thorne stood at the central console, his face a mask of grim focus. Beside him, a figure that was starkly out of place in the high-tech bunker, stood Envoy Celissa, a Vyalanaga alchemist from the Gamma Brain delegation. Her lower body was coiled in a tight, formal posture, and her unblinking, vertical-pupiled eyes watched the main map with an unnerving, analytical stillness. The map showed the sickeningly familiar green necrotic stain of the Edmonton conversion field, with a new, blinking red arrow pointing directly at Calgary. On a secondary high-priority screen, a static-laced feed showed the face of Lieutenant Colonel Jensen, broadcasting live from the Delta Point FOB. 12 hours. Jensen's voice crackled over the secure dimensional comms, his own analysts feeding him the data. Thorne, our recon confirms it. Mortis Rex and Brain will hit the northern perimeter in 12 hours. Planes, the Globemaster, and Lawkeepers 1 and 2 won't clear my FOB for another 11 hours and 30 minutes. They have half an hour of grace if the planes land on time. Thorne turned from Jensen's feed to the main communications array, where the faces of Alpha Brain's top military brass stared back. A mix of shock and grim resolve. The time for debate is over, Thorne stated, his voice ringing with authority. We are fielding a combined force. General Rhodes, you command the terrestrial effort. Brigadier General Mendez, you are the air commander. Your first aim is to hold the Calgary perimeter for 12 hours and secure the air zone for our incoming reinforcements. General Rhodes, a grizzled army veteran, spoke first. We're sending everything we can. Mechanized infantry, light armor, and what remains of the Provincial Guard. But without air superiority, and without knowing what the hell to shoot at, it's a meat grinder. Thorne nodded to the Vyalanaga. Envoy Celis, if you would. Celis leaned toward the microphone, her voice a dry, precise whisper. General Rhodes, the Glowmaster transport is carrying Magister Line. She is our foremost specialist in word field disruption and temporal warding. She brings a hand-picked team of Volpari Magisters and Balugard combat engineers. They are your immediate counter to Mortis Rex's necrotic abilities. She paused, her tongue flicking out briefly to taste the tension in the air. But she does not come alone. She brings the Alpha Brain engineers we hosted in the capital, your Geek Squad, as the soldiers call them. They have made volatile progress. They carry weapon prototypes. Project Hephaestus. These tools are dangerous to the user and untested in sustained combat, but they will hurt the dead. The Vialanaga envoy's gaze drifted across the tactical map. I will remain here. Battlefield tactics are not my specialty, but I understand their wordcraft, their alchemical weapons. I will advise your command on their capabilities and how your technology can best interface with our countermeasures. I will do my best. General Mendez, the air commander, still looked skeptical. We're relying on 20 Gamma Brain specialists against an airborne fleet of hundreds of steam-powered monsters? You are relying on their ability to create magical deterrents against Mortis Rex's necrotic energy, Celis corrected sharply, her unblinking eyes fixed on the general. Your missiles were cancelled because the planes crossed an imaginary line. Magic does not care about airspace boundaries. We fight them with what we have, General. It is a race against time, and we are losing by an hour. Thorne gave a curt nod, retaking command of the briefing. The emergency recall had been immediate and decisive. The two Lorikeeper troop transports, which had just delivered the first wave of supplies to the Gamma FOB, were already en route back, packed not with cargo, but with volunteer engineers, scientists, and veteran Eisengrim and Balugard mercenaries eager for payback against the Shadow Grasp. As the frantic activity continued, Thorne looked over at the digital clock, counting down the flight time. "11:15. He could visualize the three enormous planes racing across the brain lines, a desperate silver thread connecting a beleaguered world to its only potential salvation. The time was short, the enemy was overwhelming, and the only thing they had now was intelligence and the thin hope of 11 hours and 15 minutes. Chapter 14. The Eve of Ruin. Time, Day 20 post-lock early morning. Location, the Necropolis, over Airdrie invasion. Clock, T plus 13 hours. The flagship of the Shadow Grasp's air fleet. The Necropolis hung in the cold, pre-dawn gloom. Its massive steam paddles churning silently against the magical lift. 10 kilometers north of Calgary, the fleet's anchor ships were settling into a low, menacing orbit. On the command deck, Mortis Rex, the architect of decay, leaned over a massive, brass-bound sight glass. The enchanted lens offered him a perfectly clear, unnervingly close view of the Airdrie perimeter, the last line of defense for the city of Calgary. He saw a few scattered Alpha Brain vehicles, tiny plumes of exhaust vapor rising from their positions. He saw pinpricks of light, soldiers huddled in hastily dug fortifications. It was a pathetic token defense. "The perimeter is thin, Bruin," Mortis Rex's dry voice crackled over the command room. A few scattered provincial guards, no Accord hardware, no sign of reinforcement. General Bruin's voice, a deep, impatient growl, responded from the ground. "They are broken. They fled Edmonton, and their masters in the south left them to die. Hubris, it's a provincial problem, not an Accord one." Through the sight glass, Mortis could see her massive fired form stumping across the frozen highway, directing the setup of her artillery. "My siege masters are deploying the word cannons to the eastern ridge," Bruin continued, her voice punctuated by the metallic shriek of heavy equipment being moved. "We'll have a clear firing line on that tall glass tower they seem so proud of. The Eisengrim sappers are preparing the highway overpass for demolition. We will funnel their pathetic retreat right into our main line." Good. Vane detests waste, Mortis said, turning from the glass. He placed his skeletal hand on a central console of polished obsidian. Our Accord counterparts are proving to be exactly as Vermin's intelligence predicted. Bureaucratic, slow, and arrogant. They believe this is a regional dispute. They don't understand that the war is already over. This is merely the collection of assets. As he spoke, a low, thrumming hum vibrated through the deck. The necropolis and the 10 ships in its immediate command group activated their primary defenses. A shroud of unbeing, a shimmering field of dark energy, flared to life around their hulls, designed to absorb kinetic impacts and dissipate focused energy blasts. Mortis then ran his hand over a large, obsidian sphere mounted near the command throne. The beacon is active. A pulse of green-black energy, invisible to the naked eye but suffocating to any with word sight, washed over the entire 10-kilometer front. It was Mortis Rex's greatest tactical asset, the soul cage emitter. His own fallen soldiers weren't just animated. It saturated the very ground with necrotic energy. Any soldier, friend or foe, who fell on that battlefield would rise again. An unthinking, unfeeling soldier in his legion. The more the Alpha Grain forces fought, the more his army would swell. The cannons are set. Brewing's growl came over the rune, sharp with impatience. The troops are restless. We are ready to claim the city. Mortis Rex looked south, toward the desperate, sterile blue lights of Calgary. The Accord remains silent. They have abandoned this province to its fate. A fatal miscalculation. He straightened, his tattered robe settling around him. General Bruin, you have the field. Launch the assault. Leave nothing standing but the political tower for Vane, and the corpses for me. On the ground, Bruin the Mountain raised a massive clawed fist. A single guttural roar echoed across the plains, and the Shadow Grasp's full legion began its final, thundering charge toward the city. Chapter 15. The Alamo is YYC. Time, Day 20 post-lock. Location, Procyon Mills, RV Park. Forward Command Invasion Clock, T plus 13.5 hours. Major Boone saw Hennessy spat a stream of black synthetic coffee into an empty ammo can. His command center was a reinforced Winnebago parked in the cavernous, glass-domed food court of the Procyon Mills Mall. Outside the blast-filmed windows, the pre-dawn sky was a sick, quiet grey. His tactical screens showed the Airdrie perimeter, 5 kilometers north. It was too quiet. He hated this. He was a brawler, not a politician. But Premier Holt's, Alberta First posturing, had left them holding the bag. Now, they were in the bag. A secure comm line buzzed, a high-priority Accord channel, not the provincial net. He thumbed the receiver. Hennessy. The voice was crisp, military, and belonged to someone who hadn't slept in a week. Major, this is General Rhodes, Accord Joint Command. You're the ranking officer at the Airdrie perimeter? What's left of it, General? Boone grunted. You calling to offer condolences, or you got something real for me? A dry cough. I've got 3 heavy transports, Major. Call signs Lawkeeper 1, Lawkeeper 2, and Globemaster. They are loaded with specialists and heavy-duty magical support. They are 1 hour out from your position. Boone sat bolt upright, his battered chair creaking. Specialists? You mean people who can actually kill these bastards? Affirmative. But they need Calgary International. That's your primary objective, Hennessy. Hold YYC for 1 hour. If you lose the airport, they'll be forced to divert south to the Okotoks Air Park. That's 80 clicks from the front. They'll be useless to you. Boone glanced at his tactical map. The airport WYC was east of his position, dangerously close to the enemy's likely advance. An hour. That's a big ask, General. My men are spread thin as piss on a hot rock. You're not alone, Rhodes said, his voice hardening. I've got 2 squadrons of CF-18 scrambling out of Moose Jaw. Call sign Hammer. They are 10 minutes out, loaded for bear, and authorized to engage anything hostile north of your mall. They'll give you air cover until the big birds arrive, but they can't stop a ground rush, Major. That's on you. The line clicked off. Boone stared at the map. The enemy would come straight down the main highway. The Airdrie line was tissue paper. The airport was the only thing that mattered. "Sergeant!" he barked to a young comms tech huddled over a console. "Sir? Get me Captain Juskarat on the line. Now! Tell him to pull his entire sapper platoon back from Airdrie. I want every anti-tank mine and claymore we have planted on the access roads to the airport. Stony Trail and Barlow. I want those roads gone." He paced the RV, kicking an empty ration box. "And get those remote detonated fuel tracks from the transport depot. Park 'em on the Stony Trail overpass. We'll turn that highway into a wall of fire. It's a distraction, but it might buy us 10 minutes. The tech's fingers flew. "Sir, Juskarat says that'll leave the Airdrie line wide open. It's a full retreat." "It's not a retreat, it's a pivot," Boone roared, grabbing his tack vest. "That Airdrie line is a speed bump. The airport is the goddamn Alamo. We hold it, or we die. Make the call." He was halfway to the door when the radio wall lit up. Not one channel, but all of them, screaming at once. A panicked voice, barely coherent over a roar of gunfire and something deeper, something like 1,000 tons of rock grinding together. 01, this is Airdrie Command. They're here. Oh God, they're here. Another voice. Artillery. Incoming. It's not shells. It's green. It's... The feed dissolved into a shriek of static. Boone grabbed the main broadcast mic. All units! All units! This is Hennessy. The Alamo is YYC. Hammerflight is 10 mics out. Hold the line. Called it until hell freezes, then hold it on the ice. He slammed the mic down and kicked the RV door open. The pre-dawn sky to the north was no longer grey. It was pulsing with a sickly, horrifying green. The assault had begun.